with others to start a church or whatever there. So trying to be a resource, but also a third term that you could think of would be connective tissue. So I serve as sort of the connective tissue for all of the presbyteries and churches for the things we're going to do in a collaborative sort of way, and the things we cooperate on, whether it's training that we provide or coaching or we provide, or even assessing prospective church planters. Just all the different things we're going to do working together. So catalyst, resource, connective tissue, that's the role that I play. And we are committed to this because in the Midwest region, especially when it comes to the PCA, but shockingly overall, is so unchurched. You don't think about that. I mean, you look out the building. I'm intrigued at that building on there because the tower looks like a missile with a cross on the top there. You see churches are on every corner, but most of them aren't even churches anymore. And so few of them are actually even teaching the Bible and preaching the gospel, which is just so sad to me. And so when it comes to the PCA, it's the most unchurched region per capita of any region in the United States. We have only one church in the Midwest for every 290,000 people. It's surprising when you actually do the analysis. Overall, the Midwest region is now listed by most mission agencies or whatever as the 10th largest mission field in the world. Just in terms of sheer unchurched people. So U.S. as a whole, the United States as a whole, is the third largest mission field in the world. In terms of sheer unchurched. We have 320 million people or whatever in this country, and 260 million of those people aren't going to church anywhere at any time. They might call themselves Catholic or Baptist or Lutheran or whatever, but the fact is they haven't gone to church in a generation. And so the U.S. is the third largest mission field. But when you pull the Midwest out, the most unchurched region of the U.S., it becomes the 10th largest mission field in the world. So you start with China, and then India, soon to be reversed. China, India, Pakistan, Indonesia, and keep going. You come to Egypt, Turkey, and then the U.S., the Midwest region, in terms of sheer unchurched people. And we begin to realize those kind of things. We realize we need to become mobilized for church planting, which is the most effective way of reaching new people with the gospel. Breaking into new communities, breaking into new people groups, whatever it might be, church planting is the most effective way to do it. We find that, for example, in our church plants, at least for the first 5 years of a church plant, the conversion rate in a new church versus a church older than 5 years is 8 times greater in the first 5 years. And that's because new churches tend to be more outwardly focused. They tend to be more culturally adaptive to the community around them. And people perceive them as more accessible because they tend to be meeting in more public spaces, more accessible places, even like this what is perceived as a bank, because it used to be, and this sort of thing. People are much more willing to visit smaller churches and newer churches because they don't feel like they're crashing a party. See, visiting an established church, especially one that's an established building, is one of the scariest things a person will ever do. And therefore, even if people are inclined to go to church and feel like they want to go to church, it's just too scary, so they don't do it. Because their sense is, everybody else knows everybody else, and I don't. Everybody else knows what to do, and I don't. And if I walk in, I'm going to feel like a real stranger, out of place, don't know anybody, don't even know how to conduct myself. So they just don't go. And that's why relational connections, we'll talk about more of this after the service, what this looks like. But this is why relational connections with people in a congregation like Heart City is the way people are going to come to Christ and come to the church. That's just simply the way it's going to happen. Because the distance now between the church and our culture is just too great for people to overcome without some sort of relational connection in most cases. So here we are with one church for every 290,000, almost 300,000, people, and I still get a lot of contacts in the region. I have for years, and for a long time, people would say, "Hey, I can't find. I've moved to a community like Danville, Illinois, whatever," and they would say, "I can't find a PCA church, or I can't find a Reformed church. Could you all start one?" I've been listening to Tim Keller tapes. I've been listening to R.C. Sproul, whatever. Or I came from a PCA church, and we would really like to have one. I don't hear that anymore. I haven't heard that for years. And what I do hear all the time, and I get just as many requests for church plants in communities, but what I hear is, we can't find a Bible-believing church anywhere. We can't find a church that preaches the gospel. And the PCA has a reputation for being that kind of church. So whether they're Baptistic in background or whatever, they don't really care. It's like, we want the Bible taught, this sort of thing. And so that's the kind of request. And so we've got, just in this presbytery, there's 9 families up in Muskegon that need a church planter. There's 5 families in Salina, Kansas, that are looking for a church planter and a new church. There's families in Kankakee, you name it, Pendleton, Indiana, you name it, they are looking for, we just don't have enough church planters to do that. And so when a new church, like New City, Heart City starts, and Joel and Jamie are here leading that, you all are a part of that, that just so encourages us, because you, in our view, are our kingdom presence, a gospel presence in this community, called to be salt and light. And as I hope to share the message, with an unprecedented opportunity to make a difference in this community. Because when I start quoting numbers like I am, and those numbers include a remarkable diversity. I mean, we have a diversity in the Midwest region that is unprecedented. We have diversity in America that is unprecedented. There are 210 nations represented in the United States now. Mm-hmm. That's more than, nobody else has that. I mean, you have large Muslim presence in England or France and this sort of thing, but you don't have the diversity of the diversity that America has. Every single people group on the face of the earth that has a recognized demographic presence by the United Nations has a recognized demographic presence within the bounds of one country, which is, of course, the U.S. Nobody else has that. And that means we have unprecedented opportunity to reach people that in many places in their own country are almost unreachable. And it would be really hard for us to go there, learn a new culture, learn a new language, all the expenses involved, this sort of thing. So God in His providence has said, well, I'll tell you what, I'll make it really easy on you. I'll bring them to you. And I think we have an unprecedented opportunity and responsibility. Now, this really came home to me a number of years ago. We were planting, because one of the other things I've learned about this is that there are more missionaries coming to the United States than we send to the rest of the world. That's something I don't think the American church realizes so very much. We've become the mission field for the rest of the world. And all of this has come home to me, all these different people groups and the need for churches in our communities. I went to D.C. a number of years ago because we were planting a couple of churches, one right on Capitol Hill there, and I flew into Reagan Airport, hopped in a cab to go to visit our church planter there. And it seemed like wherever I go, cab drivers, Uber drivers are from another country. So I like to kind of find out where they're from and why they're here. So sure enough, I hop in my cab, off we go. It's going to take about 20 minutes to get where we need to go in D.C. And so I start asking the guy, I say, okay, so where are you from? He says, I'm from Ghana. I said, oh, that's great. What brings you here to the States? He said, I'm a church planter. Yeah. And I was like, whoa, really? I said, like, we send people to Ghana and other places like that all the time as missionaries. Why are you here? And it was like he had a prepared speech. Because he went on to say, well, I'm here and many others like me. First of all, because of what you Americans just don't seem to get. And that is the church in America is going downhill real fast. And if you go down, you're taking all of us with you. Because you're still the most influential people on the face of the earth. And so I've been here, sent here, to reach people with the gospel. I've also been sent here to reach people that you apparently don't care anything about. I kind of knew what he meant, but I had to ask, what do you mean, by that? And he said, well, just look, we're driving down the street. Look at all these people from all over the world, all sorts of different cultures and countries represented here. How many of these folks are in your church? He said, probably not many. And so I've been here to reach people you apparently don't care anything about. And I've had others, people like Shibu Uman, who came through our assessment center a few years ago from India. Why are you here? Why aren't you India's got 1.5 billion people. And he gave me pretty much the same speech of why he was here to plant churches and that kind of thing. I just want the American church, the PCA, to just become more aware that we are living in the midst of one of the largest, most diverse, most strategic mission fields in the world, in the history of the world. And I'd like us to kind of start saying, we need to start conducting ourselves a little differently. Instead of just seeing ourselves starting a church in a community or being a church in a community, we need to adopt a mindset that says we are missionaries stationed at a mission outpost on a mission field. And we need to conduct ourselves accordingly. Why? Because that's the reality. We just don't seem to grasp it. The rest of the world is grasping it. We're not grasping it. And so that means how we allocate resources, how we equip and train our people, kind of thing, how we design our ministry, how when we have a church or plant a church, how is it going to connect to and serve to be salt and light in our given communities here. We just need to think differently in terms of how we are equipping and mobilizing ourselves as the people of God, because these are the realities. This kind of thing came home to me again in Chicago. We had started a ministry. I built a really good relationship with a number of people at our local mosque. The imam of the mosque, the director of the institute, a few others. It was at the time the third largest mosque in America. And just kind of built relationships with them, getting to know them, know me, we're building trust. And we decided to have these things called meetings for better understanding. We're not the only ones doing it, so others were doing it too. We just said, hey, that's a good idea. So once a month, usually at the mosque, we would have these, what we call meetings for better understanding. And there'd be an agreed upon topic on almost anything. And they would have somebody preach on it from an Islamic point of view. Usually me, sometimes somebody else would speak on it from a Christian point of view. Bottom line, no matter what the topic was, I had a chance for 6 years, once a month, to preach the gospel in a mosque. And then that led to conversations outside the mosque. And several started coming to know Christ, and so they shut it down there. But the thing that really stood out to me was one night we were having these meetings, and a lot of the meetings ended with Muslims standing up on the tables or chairs and just shouting me down, just yelling Allah Akbar, kind of thing, until the meeting would come to an end. Because we do fine until we got to Jesus and the cross and the gospel and the resurrection. That was where the offense was every single time. So this Pakistani guy comes up to me. He was new to our meetings. He was new to the country. And he told me, he said, this is all very interesting to me. I've not heard this before, but I need to tell you that if we were back in my home country, I'd have to slit your throat. I'm like, whoa, okay, you don't hear that every Sunday, kind of thing. And, kind of, what do you say, Go in peace, whatever. The thing is, I thought, but you can't. Not here. And that just hit me that there is unprecedented opportunity and responsibility for us to be praying for, building relationships with, reaching out and beginning to engage the people who are our neighbors in our workplaces, in our school systems, whatever, with building and engaging them with the gospel, because if I were to try to go to Pakistan, it's actually illegal for me to have a conversation with him about the gospel. It would take years for me to learn the language, to build a relational capital, and then in secret begin to little bit by little bit engage with the gospel. Here, he's living in somebody's neighborhood, and he's free access to the gospel. And so these are just perspectives I want to have, and this is why I am encouraged by what we're doing in the Midwest. When Ann and I moved, my wife Ann, we lived in the Chicago area. When we moved to the Midwest region, back to the Midwest, we were in Virginia. I'd gone to seminary at Gordon Conwell, graduated from Michigan, University of Michigan, went to Gordon Conwell Seminary in Boston. We were 5-6 years in Virginia first, and then we came to Chicago to be involved in church planting. At that time in this region, there were a total of 35 PCA churches in the Midwest region, serving 71 million people. Now the Midwest region is everything from North and South Dakota, work your way down Nebraska, Kansas, come all the way across to the Ohio-Pennsylvania border, and even the northern half of Kentucky. Who drew the lines? I have no idea. That's just the demographic area that we've been assigned there, which in terms of land mass is huge. In terms of numbers, 71 million, it's also very large. When we moved here, 35 churches. We have now recently passed the 250 mark. So that's a lot of church planting that's been going on. We currently have 35 church plants, including Art City. But what somebody pointed out to me, I just hadn't connected the dots, is that we have as many church plants going on right now as we used to have total churches in the Midwest region 35, 40 years ago there. And so there's progress being made on that. We want to see the region, just the next phase of our growth, we want to see reach 500 churches. And if we average 200 people in each of those churches, some more, some less, but the PCA average is 210. So we just said, okay, let's just make it 200. That's like what, 100,000 people? When you put that up against 71 million, I'm not sure what the percentage is, but it's pretty small. Kind of thing. But it still will be huge progress. We want at least 10% of those people to have come to know Jesus as their Savior during that amount of time as well, if not more. But that's kind of what we're working towards. That's what we're envisioning. And with the diversity, and I'm so very encouraged by what I see happening in these church plants like Heart City here. But even in this presbytery, what's going on in the Detroit area? Yeah. With the Detroit project is just so great. 5 new launches in the last, or getting ready for the 5th launch, in the last year and a half. And it's not just the churches, but what they represent. Steve Van Nort is planting in Sterling Heights, the most diverse suburb of the Detroit, most diverse area, Detroit area, period, including the largest Chaldean population outside of Iran and Iraq. You don't usually hear the word Chaldean anymore, but that's who they are. That's who they are. Further than 15,000 Iranians and Iraqis, Chaldeans, in that community. And so he's been doing a fantastic job building relationships with them, connecting with them, inviting them into his home, building relationships of trust, engaging them with the gospel, and has seen a few come to know Jesus. But it was a hard barrier to overcome because when he starts meeting all these people, they don't trust him. Because as somebody began to tell him, some of the Iranians and Iraqis, back in Iran, in Iraq, if somebody is asking us the kind of questions you are, they're the secret police. Mm-hmm. We just come with that mindset. And it's going to take a long time to build trust. But he's doing that. And it's just so encouraging to see. You've got Jerry and Catherine Riando planting a church in Dearborn, which some of you might know is the largest Islamic population in the world outside of the Middle East there. And so that's their background. And so they're reaching students at the University of Michigan, Dearborn, a lot of young adults moving in that area, young couples, but also the gigantic Middle Eastern population in that area. Then you've got, up in Novi, Shiv Muthukumar, an Indian who has come to know Christ 10 years ago, connected with the PCA, now planting in Novi, and off to a great start, reaching the Southeast Asian, particularly Indian population in Novi. Then you've got Micah Jelenik, who is getting ready to plant up in the Clarkston, Waterford area, and Ryan McVicker, who's planting his second church. He's already planted one in the Detroit area. Now he's planting on the campus of the University of Michigan, which I think is a hugely strategic work. We already have one church that's there, but as in almost every community I can think of, we need lots of churches in all of these communities that are reaching different people. And so he had a vision night. The union, the student union, is letting him meet right on campus, which is just remarkable in a place like Michigan, which is just so liberal. But here they are, the Michigan Union, they're letting them rent out space. So he had his first meeting of just sort of like all the people he's been connecting with, this sort of thing, come and just hear vision for what this church is to be about. He had 120 people show up at the Michigan Union. Now, they have the opportunity to rent that space and begin worship services in September, which I think is absolutely stunning and remarkable. But because they cannot bring any food in at all for refreshments, even communion, they negotiate with the union that they will provide communion. Think of that. That secular, liberal-minded people are actually preparing the bread and the cups for them who don't believe in it at all, which gives all sorts of opportunity. Do you have any idea what we're doing and why we're doing it? You know, kind of thing. This is the kind of thing that's going on in different places. In Indianapolis, we're seeing several new churches getting launched. With Mike McBride on the south side, first church on the south side of Indy, over 500,000 people with almost no access to the gospel other than that church. Ben Hine planting on the near west side, which is an incredibly diverse, under-resourced community. He's planting there. And then, by God's grace, Brandon Buller will hopefully plant soon over in Fort Wayne. And I'm hoping that that's something that you and other churches here in the northern Indiana area will really get behind in whatever ways you can. Whether it's just nickels and dimes to help them financially, but even more importantly, that you'll be praying for them. Praying now that God will be preparing the way for that plant. Working in people's lives, working in the community, laying the groundwork for that church plant, praying for Brandon and his family. You can certainly be doing that, but also in due course when it comes time to do things like maybe doing some prayer walking in the community, take a Saturday morning, drive over to Fort Wayne and just walk in or hand out flyers about the new church. Or it might be that as they get started, they could use some help in the nursery. Okay, we're trying to invite our friends who would rather not be out in the nursery. So if we have one person who knows what to do in the nursery, if you could bring 2 or 3 people to handle our nursery, wow, that would be great. If we get multiple churches doing that, each taking a turn like once a quarter or something like that, that would be just a way to be involved in another mission. You've got your own going here, but it's good to connect with others as well. Or helping them with setup and takedown. This is great that you've got this. This is unusual for a new church. I mean, I've been in this business now for 40 years. I'm still in a building that we don't own. I've never been in a building that our church has owned. We always are renting space. We're still doing it even now, kind of thing. I'm still on a setup crew. So I still take my turn with everybody else to set up and take down where we meet. Just a little story that goes along with that I love to tell with my daughter, that when she was maybe, 14, 15, something like that, we were driving near our home, and she pointed to a building and said, "So, Dad, what is that?" I said, "Honey, what are you talking about?" I said, "That's the church." I said, "Oh, what do they use it for?" And it just dawned on my wife and I, this kid's never been in a church building. He's grown up in America and doesn't even know what a church building is, kind of thing. And so we explained it to her, and she says, "Oh, I thought Christians just met wherever they could meet." And we're like, "Oh, bless your sweet heart. Oh my gosh." We're so glad, actually, she has a different perspective on the church in that regard, and she ended up going to Wheaton College, and she knows all about the church, kind of thing now, and buildings and this sort of thing. But just growing up in mission churches all the time has given her a missional vision, and I'll actually be sharing a little bit more about the impact of that in her life and people that she's now engaged with the gospel in her life. But this is what's going on in the Midwest. You all are a part of that. And as a mission church here in this community, I believe that God has just given you just a remarkable opportunity to reach this community with the gospel, to be whatever influence you can for Christ as you pray for this community, as you find ways to connect with and serve this community, as you build relationships with people, pray for them, engage them with the gospel, invite them in, this sort of thing. It's just exciting and wonderful. You're part of this movement that we are seeing just even the beginning stages of here in the Midwest. So I've shared a lot real fast.
Yeah.
Let me just open up. Any questions here before we have to wrap things up, Sam?
Yes, sir. I gotta admit, you blew my socks off. When you said the Midwest is the most unchurched,
Yeah.
we lived in New England. And when you said that, it just blew me away because
Because New England's very unchurched.
bingo. Because my wife, she was shocked we could go into a restaurant that have maybe a Bible, like in LaFord, or our Daily Bread sitting around. We never seen that in New England.
Yeah.
The coasts aren't worse than the Midwest, the East Coast, West Coast areas.
Percentage-wise, they are. Total population, they aren't. Yeah. Like, it's amazing in California. It's the land of megachurches, for one thing. And, for example, even in the PCA, we have just dozens and dozens and dozens of just Korean churches. The largest PCA church is a 10,000 member Korean church in LA. So when you start, doing the analysis and realizing who is where and has what going on, you're like, okay, well, I never thought about that. So California, percentage-wise, is actually more church than the Midwest. In terms of percentages, Northwest and Northeast are less, percentage-wise.
Okay.
In terms of sheer numbers, nobody tops the Midwest.
Okay, got you. Okay,
Yeah.
thank you.
And, can I just ask a question, building off of, your Brandon Bowler
Yeah.
point? Joel and I went to a conference, Lampstand in February.
Great conference, yeah.
And it was really apparent to us that a lot of times when somebody planning a church isn't the right personality maybe or
Uh-huh.
whatever. And so you mentioned Brandon Bowler, we loved it here, and we think he's the right candidate and everything, personally. And you said something about assessing church planners as part of your duties or
Right.
responsibility. Do you go through that with Brandon, or do you go?
We
through-
sure have, yep. He went through, we have several levels. One is called the Readiness Seminar, which is an early assessment tool for which he's been through. And it was, at the time, which he did like 5 years ago, it was like trying to help people answer the question, seminary students, assistant pastors, campus staff, whatever, should church planting be on my radar? Is this something I should be thinking about? And if so, what do I do to move down that path, gaining the kind of experience and training that I would need? Then after you've been doing that, following up on that feedback, then you go to the assessment center, which Joel has been to, and that's a more intensive, comprehensive, where the first one is a little bit more indicative versus definitive.
Okay.
The assessment center itself is more definitive versus indicative.
Mm-hmm.
And that's when we say, okay, you are either ready to go plant or almost ready to plant, but work on A, B, C, and D, and then we'll have you go out and plant. But yeah, it's the primary way we vet people.
Yeah, one of the things that was really apparent was the ABCDs are more, not head knowledge, but
Right.
more character.
Right.
And I think that was the pitfall that a lot of inner city churches and PCA down south were focusing on, getting that personality, that head smart person versus some of the character traits that are necessary.
Right. Nationally speaking, the success rate of church plants is 25%. With those who've gone through the assessing and the training and the coaching that we provide, It's a little over 90%
Oh, wow.
in the PCA, yeah. At least in terms of those that are still going. They haven't all particularized or this sort of thing yet, but at least they're still going, so. Folks are starting to arrive, it's 10:40. Let me pray, and then I will turn you loose. I'll hang around and we'll get ready for the service. Father, I do thank you for Heart City. I thank you for Joel and Jamie, for all these folks who are here. Thank you for the work you are doing in their midst. Thank you for what they represent for the Elkhart community, northern Indiana and beyond. I pray your presence among them, your blessing upon them, that you would continue to build them up and strengthen them in Jesus, that they will grow in their love for you, for one another, and also for this community in which you've placed them, that this community that is lost in rebellion against you, people who don't know Jesus, who apart from Christ will be going to hell. Lord, we ask that you would please use Heart City, continue to build this church so that its light shines brighter and brighter, that its salt goes deeper and deeper, and that they are increasingly a redemptive presence in this community. I commit them into your hands. Thank you, Father, for them. In Jesus' name, amen.
Thank you, Ted.
All right. Casey, you made my day.
I know, I missed you guys.
Amen.
Yes.